Constitutionalist here on 1550 KXEX, the best talk in town. Today I am joined by Eric Olsen. So we got Eric and Eric on the seats, and we're going to be talking about kind of the utter mess that Afghanistan has turned into. It was years of mess, but before we get to that, we've got some opportunities to get involved. So these are really just local events where you can go out and make your voice heard. Don't sit on your butt. So first one is this coming Sunday at the Tower Theater. The left is still trying to stop a legal sale of the Tower Theater to Adventure Church. By the way, the Tower Theater run by the church is still having the same types of events. It's just that the leftists don't like the fact that a church is there in the tower. Think about that. So here's an opportunity from 8 to 11, Sunday morning, 1:30. So just in a couple days, to go out and stand for religious freedom. Another event, same day, Sunday, from 2 to 4 at Blackstone and Nice is a medical freedom rally. All of this isn't over. You know, the CDC has finally admitted that anything less than an N95 mask doesn't work, yet we still have King Newsom imposing tyranny on us. Yet people are taking it. I was in LA recently, and that information had come out. None of them, almost nobody I talked to had heard of that. And they seem to have adopted the position of a sheep, which is just sad. We should be questioning our government. We have an obligation to freedom and to liberty to question. Monday night, 1:31, last day of the month, we have a Constitutionalist for California Clovis chapter meeting at 6:30 p.m., 1123 Railroad Avenue. Those that regularly attend in Kingsburg and listen to my show, no Kingsburg meeting. Instead, the Kingsburg group is going to go to a Fresno GOP meeting. They will have a candidate event. They don't allow us to come in and see any of the secret workings of their actual meeting. Yes, Fred Vanderhoof, I'm calling you out, and I won't be done. But we can go watch the candidates speak. These are 4 different Republican candidates running for Devin Nunes's vacated position. I think it's a great opportunity. You're supposed to register online. I can't seem to find that information, but I don't see why they would dare turn you down if you showed up at 1084 West Bullard Avenue. Because wouldn't they want people that are concerned to step out? Wouldn't they want people that are concerned to participate in government? I'm sure they'd welcome you. So there's 4 candidates. If you do register online, you do have the opportunity to ask questions, but you probably can meet the candidates afterwards anyway, get a sense of who they are. You want to pick somebody that represents your values. February 5th from 9 to 3 is an election integrity forum. That'll be in Clovis. You do have to register online. Great event, limited seating. Last I heard, they moved it up to 300 seats, but I think it's going to sell out. If you're interested, I can put a link in the Facebook show notes. I will figure out how to put a link in the Spotify and YouTube show notes, like in the comments. And final event, I'm not going to talk much about this one because it's quite a ways in the future. It is March 5th. No Left Turn in Education is going to have a critical race theory kind of seminar and how to fight back. And I truly think that is one of the fronts for freedom. From the perspective of the people that like critical race theory, they think that it's anti-racism. But if you have to use racism to fix racism, isn't it the wrong solution? Anyway, I'll have more on that one coming up. I'd like to go ahead and introduce my guest, Eric Olsen. Welcome.
Thank you much. Nice to be here. And before we start, I want to touch on one of the things you said about the Medical Freedom Rally to just let everyone know what's going on out there. I work in health. I work around healthcare with seniors in and out of health settings. Right now in the state of California, full vaccine and the booster requirements have changed. You're not vaccinated in a healthcare setting unless you have the booster. Look at Israel. They're on their 4th boosters. And they're also getting COVID and dying from COVID at a higher rate than any other nation in the world right now. So If you don't think this is coming out to the general population of mandated boosters, the new mandate is Johnson & Johnson. You're not fully boosted unless you get a booster within 2 months of the initial shot. This is from the state of California Department of Public Health. So I encourage everyone to go out to that and make your voices heard.
Yeah, agreed.
Sorry
really
for,
important.
Yeah, sorry for derailing us there right off the bat.
Not a problem. So you served, so thank you first for serving. So that kind of gave you a background about Afghanistan. How did you get involved in an organization, kind of a new group that is trying to change some things that are happening there?
So yeah, it started actually pretty benignly enough. Like you said, I served. I was on active duty for a little over 10 years, did 2 tours in Iraq. But I never went to Afghanistan. So it was kind of always the other war. I didn't know a whole lot, knew a lot of people that had been there, but didn't really know a lot about the tribal, the local situation on the ground. During the, after the U.S. withdrawal, the overnight withdrawal from Afghanistan, and then moving into the airlift, I had some friends of friends reach out to me and basically start telling me about their interpreters, the people they worked with, their contacts in Afghanistan from their time over there, and asking me if I knew of any way to help them. Of course, at the time I didn't, but I still have quite a few friends that are on active duty. I guess I'm getting to the age where my friends are now a little bit higher in the organization. And so I said, yeah, I can make a few calls. I'll see what I can do. As I tell everyone, that took me down the rabbit hole. Within 36 to 48 hours, I had gotten a crash course in every single secure messaging app. I was literally chatting all day and all night with people on the ground in Afghanistan, military at the airport, Afghans that were in hiding in Kabul trying to get to the airport. All of the stuff that you read about at the time, the Pineapple Express, all of those guys, I was involved with all of those chat rooms getting people out. And then on, I believe it was the 30th of August, we left. And there was this huge feeling of, we've gotten to know so many people that are still on the ground there. We know that these people are literally in a spot where they could be killed at any time by the Taliban. What do we do? So with that, what do we do? I actually met through a mutual friend, James Bradley, and we kind of just started throwing around. He's a Coast Guard vet. He's running for Senate in California, U.S. Senate from California for the seat that Padilla is currently in.
You should connect us. Absolutely
will. And so we started talking about, what can we do? Because there was a lot of organizations that were looking at, we're going to move people out of Afghanistan. That's great. That is important. That is crucial. A lot of those organizations have gone to feeding them, providing medical care. We have one of the members of our coalition, Russ. He's up all night directing underground doctors to people that are having medical emergencies on the ground in Afghanistan. So we have a great ground organization in Afghanistan. The problem is getting people out of Afghanistan right now is incredibly expensive. To move one person can be anywhere from $5,000 to $15,000. That's just to move them. They still have to get all their documentation. The movement is only to another country. They still have to wait for 6 to 12 or more months to get all of their paperwork in order because of what our government's doing to stymie that paperwork. And I know we'll talk about that later. And so that is such a, it's not a feasible product for the number of people, which we're estimating right now probably at least 100,000 people that are truly being hunted by the Taliban, at least. The humanitarian side, 2 to 5 million is what the UN is saying. And that's at immediate risk of starvation, murder, etc. So we knew that that was going on. And James and I knew that that was one of the critical aspects. But we also knew that there's not enough money, time, energy in the world to get people out at that process. Even if you look at $5,000 times 100,000 people, that's a lot of money.
Right.
So the other part that we started looking at that really no one else was looking at the time was the political and social aspect. We know that within a week after us departing Kabul, it was totally gone from the news. No one was talking about it anymore. But we needed to get it back into the media. We needed people to not forget about Afghanistan. We had 40 people, what was it? It was less than a week ago, probably about 3 days, rounded up in Mazar-e Sharif that were trying to get on flights out of that city to get out of Afghanistan. They were rounded up. Many were beaten. Some were killed. The rest of them just disappeared. No one's seen them. This is going on right now. And so we needed to get the social awareness to put pressure on the political machine. And our group is not political. We are not party politics. One of our key members, Brad Parks, and he will tell you every time you talk to him, he's a Hollywood progressive. James, he's running for Senate as a Republican.
Right, but I think this is beyond politics. If you care about Americans and you care about people that stood as our allies, in some cases literally for 20 years, then you should be for the humanitarian effort.
And that's exactly right.
I want to back up just a little bit and give people a little sense of Afghanistan. Roughly the size of Texas, very rural, mountainous. Even the low areas would probably be, by most standards, be considered kind of high desert. It's very dry, so the agricultural land is not very good. They don't have a lot of options aside from growing poppies, which makes opium. Or do they have another option? Minerals, mining.
So yeah, a good way to think of it is, Colorado Plateau. It is very high elevation, very high mountains, not a lot of water. And one of the stories that I think just kind of, for me, encapsulates Afghanistan as someone that didn't serve there is that in these towns, and really the cities are towns, the people throughout the summer that have all of their livestock, they save all the animal dung and dry it out because the air's so dry, and that's what they burn over the winter, because that and all their trash.
So there's no trees.
There's no trees. There's no growing. This is truly, it is a mountainous high desert with the exact same temperatures, snow, all of the same things that make it so it was so hard to get across the Rockies during westward expansion. It is a truly inhospitable land.
But they still managed to have about 40 million people, which think of that as a little larger than California. I get these are rough numbers. It's also not, there's tribes, but religiously they're not diverse, though the tribes largely don't get along, is my understanding. So there were never developed a culture like America, which we seem to be moving away from, but a uniquely distinct American culture where people were Americans first and then they were whatever ethnicity. Instead, they're still tribal. They're their ethnicity first. The only agreement most of them have is that they are all part of Islam.
Yes, and
then there's two sects. I get that. Two different groups within that, but
yeah, and I think that this is one of the things where I kind of come back to my Iraq experience, is that I think we as a Western culture can't even really comprehend, because it is tribal, it is religious, it is sect, it's truly even within the same sects, it's followers of which imam, it's family lineage, it's cultural, regional. There are so many different factors that go into how the people within the borders of Afghanistan view each other, that it's almost impossible to say exactly what each group is going to do, who they're going to align with, and for what reason. But it is safe to say it is very, very splintered, very, very tribal is a good word. And that goes into some of the difficulty of operating within Afghanistan.
The other thing is the strategic importance of Afghanistan. China's already there. They've already moved in, and they were in within a week or so, because Afghanistan borders China. The other big one is it borders Iran on the other side. So think of it as it's near the western edge of China, just above India, right next to Pakistan. You know, the three other countries, the stands, Uzbekistan, Tajikistan, and starts with a K.
Those are the two main ones, is Uzbek and Tajikistan. Yep.
They're not so strategically important, except that they are largely controlled by Russia. So you've got two major world powers that want the minerals, and China's the one that moved in first. It also allows China a direct path through to the Middle East.
Yeah, and getting into geopolitics could be a graduate level course at this
point.
point.
I'm not going to go much more than that, but I want people to understand where it is, why it's so important, I think that's part of why we held on so long. We went in with the idea that, oh yeah, we could just turn it into a democracy, and culturally, in some places, that simply doesn't work. So that is kind of sad that we have that perspective but haven't learned that lesson. Bush went in for that reason. We also never went in with the will that we were really going to completely take them out. There were all these rules of engagement, and maybe that's the new reality, because we used to be warriors. And I believe that our volunteer military is still warriors, but I don't know that the politicians are still warriors. We're going to go ahead and take a break. This is Eric Rollins, the Constitutionalist, here on 1550 KXEX, the best talk in town. When we return, we're going to just start looking at how can we understand this problem. We're going to define it a little bit more, and then we're going to move towards the end of what are the solutions, because I think this man is looking at some ways to change the narrative there, and we need to make people aware, because we left friends and allies, and I assume some Americans also. So we are. I do want to take a moment to say thank you to all of my viewers now on Spotify. I'm new on Spotify. I'm new on YouTube. If you like, please like. If you subscribe, that's even better. If you make comments, I love, even if they're negative comments. I had somebody on Facebook last week that was quite negative about some of the things that happened, but that's okay. Look, freedom allows for dissenting opinions. And so just because somebody says something that you hate does not make it hate speech. Keep that in mind. So we're going to go ahead and come back. This is Eric Rollins, the Constitutionalist, here on 1550 KXEX, the best talk in town. Today I'm joined by Eric Olsen, and we're talking about the mess in Afghanistan and how to potentially save those allies that are still there. We left a lot of people behind. I don't understand why we made some of the choices we did. I don't object to that we got out. We didn't have the will to win, so we shouldn't have been there. But why would you leave before everybody? Why would you take all the military support out before everybody that mattered was out? And can you speak to what Biden chose to do?
I can. So I think that the distinction you just made is so critical, and that's the first step in why we're not having a discussion with this nationally. There is a difference between disagreeing on how we left and if we should have left. Mm-hmm. Those are two very, very, very different things. How we left created a power vacuum. We were there, and then the next day, poof, we were gone. We left the equipment behind. We left,
and we're not just talking tractors. We're talking guns,
helicopters, night vision goggles.
Yeah, real stuff that an average American couldn't even buy.
Yes, very, very high-tech stuff. And when you leave that power vacuum, back to what we were saying with Afghanistan being tribal, the people in charge are the same people. Quite often, they go where the wind blows. We trained all of these folks on the ground, from their infantry to their special forces to their pilots. Those folks wanted to keep fighting. They wanted to do what was right. But a lot of the leadership, the senior leadership in Afghanistan, as soon as we left, they looked at their options. If they continue to hold out, they will probably be hunted down and killed by the Taliban, or they switch sides and everything is great because we're no longer there to have their back.
So they had the pull to save themselves as opposed to the average person. They're just willing to sacrifice.
Yes. Yeah. And so that also goes back to, we were talking earlier, geopolitics. That's what allowed China to come in. When Afghanistan has such a minimal national control, national presence, when there's no overhead of the American social military force, and there's no Afghan government because they all disappeared when we left, that means that there's a giant vacuum in China. Like you said, they were there within a week, come right across the north border, and they set up and they've been operating.
Well, they want those mines.
Yep. And so the way that it was handled could not have been planned to be any worse for the people that helped us for 20 years.
Well, wait, I remember watching a press conference with our president, and he said it couldn't have gone any better.
And that's where, when you're talking with people that are actually on the ground, there's no rational explanation for that. When we left, one of the things that we always hear about in the news is we got all the Americans out. I know for a fact that's not true, and I'll tell you a story of one person and why, figures matter and how people use words. This person, I believe he's a green card holder. He lived in America. He served alongside of America for 20 years. He is a licensed permanent resident. He was in Afghanistan because his father passed away. He was there to attend the funeral when the country fell.
Wow.
His mother, this is an elderly female with no male relatives in Afghanistan.
And culturally, that is a huge deal because women have almost no rights. All your rights come from your nearest male relative.
I would say they have no rights instead of almost no.
Okay.
So
I'm not going to argue that one.
Yeah. And so what happened is the State Department got in touch with this gentleman, said, show up here and we'll get you out. His mom applied for a visa before the fall of Afghanistan, but it has not been approved. He said, I cannot leave my mom because if I leave her alone, that is a death sentence coming into the winter. So it's just an absolute death sentence. And they said, okay, you've been given an opportunity. And they left. They wouldn't take his mom. They wouldn't take anything. He is still in Afghanistan right now. He is still in hiding. He is still trying to find a way to get out.
Well, there's an important parallel there. If he found a way to get his mom to the southern border of our country, they would have been non-government organizations, quasi-government organizations that get their funding largely from the U.S. government that would have helped them immediately move across the border. You'll notice that the people coming across the border are generally clean and well-dressed. If you really walked all the way from Central America, would you have new shoes on? So it's completely acceptable for our southern border to be open, but somebody that worked as an ally or their immediate parent, and we are a country that honors chain migration and have a long tradition of honoring refugees. And if you have a very serious chance of being killed after helping the U.S., wouldn't they be an ally? Don't we have an obligation to help them?
And that's really the critical distinction is people that were citizens or green card holders had done this process many years before. People that have, the other group is called SIV, which is a special immigrant visa. The special visas, same thing, have to be approved by the government many, many months before. All of those people are actually pretty easy to move. It's the others. And so what those folks are is those are people that had been to America, trained in America, and wanted to end up going to America. Okay, good. That's great. What that leaves out is all of the people that were vested in making a free Afghanistan. The military, the police, the judges, the doctors. We have there's two individuals, female, a doctor and a nurse, who were treating the women of Afghanistan. when we were there.
That's risky if women have no rights.
When we were there. After we left, they wanted to still continue to give healthcare to Afghan women. The Taliban heard about this, came into their clinic, destroyed the clinic, beat both of them, and they had to both go into hiding. Those individuals were vested in a free Afghanistan, a prosperous Afghanistan where women have rights, where minorities have rights, where there's the rule of law. They didn't have visas and green cards because they didn't want to go to America. They wanted a free Afghanistan. Those are the people that have the biggest targets on their back because they have no way out right now. And that's really the tragedy, is we had this number of 60, 70, 80,000 people during the airlift, whatever that number is, that there was virtually no vetting of. And that's a whole nother issue. But we have people that are on the ground in Afghanistan that I'm still working with, 2 individuals on the ground and their families in Afghanistan. I have it vetted. I know his brother because I got his brother out, or their brother out, and I know the individuals within the U.S. military that they worked with over the 20 years in Afghanistan. I can vet these individuals. The State Department is not allowing, or is not progressing their visa requests to bring them to the United States. It's been since August. They submitted their visa requests in August. Nothing has been done. Our State Department is actively not progressing people through the visa process, and that's the biggest impediment right now to getting people back here to the U.S.
Well, I think a great illustration of how the current regime, and Trump was referred to as a regime, so I'm going to refer to the Biden presidency as a regime because I think it's fair. If it goes on one foot, it goes on the other. When Biden was at the funeral, you can watch the video. He made a point of very exasperated, looking at his watch continually. He didn't even want to honor the few, well, way too many, because one was too many, but the military individuals, mostly Marines, that died trying to get people out during the evacuation. He couldn't be bothered. It was completely clear that he didn't care, that he kind of resented having to be at the funeral because, oh my God, well, look at my watch. Well, wait a minute. Clearly, there's not a culture where you're thankful for that volunteer force that went the extra mile, that are following the orders of the government and trying to preserve freedom.
Yeah, and that the whole thing at the airport, that was really eye-opening for me. So I've been off active duty for 12, 13 years. So it's been a little while. What I saw during that is, so I actually had one of the families that I was getting out was at the Abbey Gate about 2 hours before that suicide bombing. So I know that area through that part of the operation. And what amazed me in that whole operation is that when I was talking to my friends that were higher up within the military structure, and to hear their exasperation of what they were not being allowed to do, and then to talk to a lot of my former military friends, some of them on the ground in Afghanistan, that you had former military going out into basically the streets of Kabul, finding their people, bringing them to the gate. The military, the active duty military at the gate, is being told they're not allowed to bring people through. I won't say anyone was disobeying orders, but a lot of people ended up getting through.
Well, thank goodness.
Absolutely. And so the fact that on the ground was that disassociated from what they were being told, that's something that I got back to West Point in the mid 90s. So that was, 15 years of 100% military. I'd never even thought of something like that. But this was open because what was going on in Afghanistan was so bad and so tragic on the ground that everyone could see it. And the military and the former military were truly taking matters into their own hands to rescue as many people as they possibly could. And that's a shocking revelation for me to see just where we were with how bad things were on the ground.
Well, I have military, my dad's former military, lots of relatives that are military or former military. And one of the things they always talk about is loyalty. Well, they had in multi-year, maybe as many as 20-year relationships with Afghanis that were supporting what we were doing there. Whether you agree with what we were doing there or not, that we're trying to do the right thing, working with the Americans, and then we're supposed to just abandon them. Why does the current administration not care? And I don't expect an answer to that, but what you need to realize is the current administration doesn't care, but things can be shifted politically. And so while he doesn't seem to care about his polls, or maybe he does, but I don't know. I watched part of the press conference the other day, and I couldn't figure out what his answer to a question was. And I watched it multiple times, and I'm reasonably bright. So you come to the conclusions you want. But I do believe that if you call your individual senators, you call your individual congressmen, that with enough voices, they have to care. Because they care about being reelected. Even if they don't care about the issue, they care about being reelected. A few of them will step up.
Yeah, that's been another one of the really eye-opening things in all of this, is that we have many members of Congress and Senate that served. Quite a few of them that served in Afghanistan. They know what's going on here, and the silence has been truly deafening. There have been a couple of congressmen and senators that we've spoken with off the record that say they are very in tune and sympathetic with what's going on in Afghanistan, but none of them have come out online in a public way. And the tragedy of this is, in today's hyper-partisan nation, it boils down to politics in everything. But this is a human tragedy. No matter what, we remember during President Trump, Syria, this terrible humanitarian crisis in Syria, and it was a humanitarian crisis. The humanitarian crisis, the individual human toll in Afghanistan is many, many, many times bigger than Syria. Yet there's no press coverage. There's no congressman going onto the floor of the House or the Senate. No one is standing up. And so, Eric, you're exactly right. Call your politician. I don't care if it's the local dog catcher. Have the local dog catcher talk to his or her contacts and raise awareness of the issue, because, and maybe part of it is that I'm so close to it, seeing these messages coming across the line, but there are literally people dying every day. I'm not exaggerating. I'm not using hyperbole. There are people in Afghanistan dying every single day.
And it's not just because they're being hunted down and executed. It is such a poor country in the rural areas with a poor agricultural base that if their supply chain breaks down, they die. It's cold, it's miserable, they starve.
Yeah, we've during the winter, we've actually transitioned a lot of the efforts in the country to getting people food, blankets, and heaters, because they are starving to death or they are freezing to death. And that's bad. When spring hits about April and the Taliban starts moving around again, they're going to move from starving to death and freezing to death to being hunted to death. And so none of these options are good. And that's where we want to put that pressure on the politicians. If it's a veteran who's a politician, they absolutely know that they should be standing up.
So no excuses.
No excuses. You
don't even have to educate them.
Nope. I don't care if they have a D after their name or an R after their name. If they served, they know what's going on over there, and they need to stand up for the folks in Afghanistan. And when I say stand up, I'm not saying that we need the president to come out and change his tune and say, we're going to do whatever. Congress has allocated money. The money has actually been put in a checkbook to help Afghans. It's being sat on. It's not being used. There are many, many great organizations, and that's why our organization is called Allied Rescue Coalition. We have a coalition of organizations with private donations that are willing to move people, fly people, feed people, give people medical care, you name it. Even if the government just gets out of the way,
You'll handle it.
we can handle it. There was a meeting a few months ago back east, and it had to do with basically creating an open letter to the president. I encourage everyone to go there. It was published under Afghan Evac /open letter. I don't have the exact URL, but you can find it pretty easily. And that gives, I believe it's 10 or 15 points of exactly what they need to do to help in Afghanistan. And the points are very, very, very simple. Things like, since August, the only place for an Afghan to get interviewed for their visa is now it's one in Pakistan and one in UAE. Why?
But we have air bases and other military bases around the world.
Absolutely. So right now, if you have your visa application in, it could take up to 12 months just to get an interview, because the interview has to be done in person. And then after you do the interview, you have to come back to get a paper visa.
But I want to come back to, wait a minute, this is crazy. Anybody can walk across our southern border, and the Democrats are all for that. But actual allies are being abandoned, and the bureaucracy is being thrown at them rather than getting out of the way.
Yep, and we've actually, within these groups, there's been talk about that. Just fly them illegally to Mexico and have them walk across. There's all sorts of ramifications that go along with that. So I don't know of anyone that's doing that right now, but
I'd understand why if they did.
Absolutely. The solutions are so simple. There have been times in the past where the government has done virtual interviews for visas.
In a COVID world, we have trouble figuring out how to do a Zoom type interview.
Yeah, it's very, very simple. That's the number one roadblock to getting our allies out of Afghanistan right now, is they can't get their visas. They can't get their visas because they can't get interviewed. Because to get interviewed, you have to figure out a way to get across the border. And this some people might not like this, but this is the Middle East. You get across borders by bribing people.
Well, no, that makes sense. If everything's tribal and they don't really stand for anything but their tribe, then there's no national identity. That totally makes sense.
Yeah, think of it as, you're paying your fee at the port of entry. That's what you're doing. So you have to go to Pakistan. You have to go through Pakistan security. Pakistan is very pro-Taliban. You have to go through Pakistani security. You have to get on a list to go to the embassy. You have to go through security again. You have to get your interview date. You have to go back home. You have to wait for months and months and months, go back through security to get your interview, back through security again, back through security again to pick up your paper visa.
And every step you have to bribe them, I'm sure.
Every step there's money changing hands. And so if we just did virtual interviews, all of that's taken care of. Then you can do a secure, there's ways to do it. I'm not a techie kind of guy, but a secure visa sent to the person. Secure messenger, two-mode authentication. There's a lot of different ways to do this. Then we could actually have people fly directly out of Kabul, out of Mazar-e-Sharif, out of these big cities in Afghanistan. They can just fly if they have the visa. That is the number one problem right now. We can get them flights. We can get them passports. We can get them everything. The State Department is the only organization that can give them a visa that allows them to fly to the United States. And to just give you some other idea of how pervasive this problem is, one of the members of one of our coalition organizations is, I don't have permission to use his name and title. Let's say he's a high government organization in one of the states here in America. His organization got together with the Arab Chamber of Commerce, raised the money. They actually have a connection with one of the princes in UAE, who happens to be the head of Qatar Airways. They chartered a flight through Qatar Airways. They paid for it. They did everything they needed. The flight was on the ground, ready to fly into Kabul to pick up, I think it was about 320 people. The Qatari government was fine with it. The princes were fine with it. It was paid for. Qatar Airways was fine with it. Everyone was fine with it. The U.S. State Department kept changing requirements on allowing those people to get into our air base at Doha, Qatar, where they could be processed to then be flown to the U.S. This mission waited on the ground, I think, for over 2 months and was finally abandoned because every week the State Department changed the rules to allow this flight to go forward.
So clearly somebody's playing a game. And it's very difficult to reach the bureaucracy, but it's not so hard to reach your elected representatives.
Absolutely.
And I would encourage that you don't just email, though emails are effective, because they do look at numbers, even if they don't look at your individual email. But if there's enough people, it matters. But calling. A lot of us, through family, just through connections, know our elected representatives. It's even more effective if you have a way in. If you can find a way to have a few minutes of conversation saying, look, I've been talking to all of my neighbors. Don't make it seem like you're alone. I've been talking to my neighbors. And we care about this issue, and we expect you to act if you're going to be reelected.
Yep.
And this one is beyond left or right. You should reach out to every elected representative.
It really is. And, I encourage people to think outside the box. You mentioned, replacing Devin Nunes earlier. Well, Devin Nunes is going to have a really big platform nationally very soon. If you know Devin Nunes, say, have this be an issue on your platform.
Mm-hmm.
That is outside of the box. He's a former politician now, but that's outside the box thinking. And some of the things, this tends to come down often into left and right, which is unfortunate. But here in California, we tend to think, oh, well, my politicians just don't care. I call them and I send them letters and they just don't care. I do the same thing and get the same form letters back. Something to think of is the two largest Afghan populations in America are the Bay Area and LA area. There's a lot of constituents. The Afghan community in the South Bay is very big, very strong.
Good.
Call your representatives. That means, senators, absolutely. You have large Afghan populations in your state.
Well, both state and federal senators.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So call people and let them know that you're following what's going on in Afghanistan and that you're not going to sit by and just let these people truly just be abandoned to death.
We're going to go ahead and take our last break. So this is Eric Rollins, the Constitutionalist, here on 1550 KXEX, the best talk in town. When we come back, we're going to talk about ways to fix this, specific plans that maybe your organization has. If you like what's going on, another way to get the word out is to spread the word. You can share this video. You can comment on this video. All of us have multiple places we're on social media. That seems to be a way to get the word out since the national media is largely ignoring this issue. So when we come back, why are you hopeful? You wouldn't go into all this work if you didn't believe that you could fix it. Because I've met you and talked to you. You're the kind of guy that you're more than willing to tackle a problem, but you want to have some shot at success. So we're going to go ahead and come back online. This is Eric Rollins, the Constitutionalist, here on 1550 KXEX, the best talk in town. Today, I am joined by Eric Olsen, and we are discussing the utter mess in Afghanistan. And we're trying to figure out how can we fix this issue. Not only do people have to be made aware, it jumped into the public spotlight and then it almost disappeared. When it seemed almost like we shifted from Afghanistan to, oh wait, we got to do the COVID mandates, as if the Biden administration was looking for a way to distract the people. Because, he was on public record in speeches several times saying, I will not impose a vaccine mandate on you. And as soon as he got in hot water, oh, well, let's change the subject. I'm sure that's not politics. It's just pure coincidence. So why are you hopeful?
So why am I hopeful? I'll be the first to admit there's been times throughout this that myself and everyone else hasn't been very hopeful. I described right after August 30th, there was not a lot of hope. What keeps me going is I know that this is a very, very tough situation and the solutions are very, very difficult. There's two things. One, the people that I'm working with. And this goes from, I mentioned James Bradley. So he's the president, I'm the vice president of Allied Rescue Coalition, working with great people. He has put his Senate campaign on hold. I am dedicating more time to this than my business should let me.
I totally get that. I'm self-employed and I'm doing this.
Absolutely. And so there's great people that have put so much on hold that are doing absolutely amazing things. We have someone, we don't use his name, we just call him the Legend. And the Legend is part of our group. He's been back to Afghanistan in person many, many, many times since the fall. He's a former military, Afghan descent, so he knows everything about the country. He's literally rescued thousands of people from Afghanistan, personally, himself on the ground. The Legend is an amazing person. And I could talk for the rest of the show for the individual people that are doing phenomenal work, that are working against all odds. That is so encouraging that this is something that is important enough to people across party lines, across geographies. One member of our group is a former Canadian Special Forces. He always talks to us from up in the Great White North, and he tells us about how soft we are because our weather's so great down here. And it's true. And so, but we have people around the country, around the continent, around the world that are doing so much to help out here. The second thing is when you hear the stories. I got my the main family that I got out, the one that got me into this whole thing. I got them out about a day and a half before the last flight. Most people don't know that last day, basically no one got out. So when I was working to get these folks through the gate, there was gunfire. Their handlers were being shot at. To the best of my knowledge, they were one of the last groups to actually get through the gate before the airlift ended. He and his family and his children are in Texas right now. And they are happy and proud to be Americans. They're not citizens yet, but they're going that direction. And that kind of story keeps you going because as many people as are in crisis, as big as the need is, every single person that we move, every single person that we get out is someone that has a chance that they didn't have before. So, you could call it looking glass half full, whatever you want to call it. If you focus on what's not getting done, it can be tough.
Well, every great crisis you read about, there were moments where the people that were the leaders that fixed that problem always had those doubts. It's hard to stay positive. But what you're doing is you're bringing potentially people that are going to absolutely fight for and love freedom. Most of my friends that are first-generation Americans, they are profoundly aware of the difference and passionately in support of freedom and the Constitution. So I am assuming that these are going to be the same kind of people.
Absolutely, absolutely, and yeah, just seeing them embrace the freedom and being such outspoken, so thankful. I mean, when you really think about a lot of these folks, probably one person in the family knew English at all. They're in a totally different environment. I mean, think about going from Afghanistan to Texas. That's a big change. When you don't speak the language, you get dumped in the middle of it, and you basically have to start integrating into what is going to be your new home.
Truly immersion.
Yes, absolutely. And they are so thankful. They are so thankful. So Yeah, just seeing that gives me and the folks that I work with continued effort to just want to keep going.
How do they contact your organization? I know that money can help. Even if you don't have time, money could help.
Yeah, so the best thing, AlliedRescueCoalition.org. That's our website. You've got the donate button on there. Everything is everything you need to know is right there. Donate, donate, donate. I know that it is, everyone asks for money, but truly every dollar that goes in there, like I said, James and I, we are not taking a cent. Thank you much.
You are welcome.
We are not taking pay right now, both of us. We're using every dollar to help. Donate, keep people informed, share stuff about Afghanistan, call your politicians, call your senators, call the news media, tell them, follow what's going on in Afghanistan, and we can make a difference.
Absolutely. This is Eric Rollins, the Constitutionalist, here on 1550 KXEX. I want to say thank you to all my viewers. If you like, hit the like button. If it's on Spotify or YouTube, you can also subscribe. This is an important issue, and I believe that we can make a difference. Get out there and get involved, folks. Can you give me the contact information for your organization one more time?
Absolutely. AlliedRescueCoalition.org. We have socials. James and I are not big social guys, so they're rudimentary at best, but you can contact us through all the typicals. Facebook, I think we've got a LinkedIn, we've got Instagram, we've got Twitter, and all of them are some version of Allied Rescue Coalition.
Well, good, because I'm proud to say that I got to spend this time with you. Thank you for serving, and thank you for, again, stepping up afterwards. This is almost another way to serve. Protecting freedom is that important, and these were allies that should not be abandoned.
Absolutely.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you.